I should have known it wasn't going to last the second her mother looked me up and down like I crawled out of a bargain bin. You'd think after 2 years of dating and 6 months of planning a wedding, I'd have earned at least a little respect. But no, the ring I saved up for, a modest but meaningful solitaire, she called it cheap. Then she tossed it at me. That's when something in me shut off. Not in anger, but like a switch you flip when a room is too loud. I picked up the ring off the hardwood floor of their living room in Flagstaff, Arizona, polished pine beneath my shoes, air smelling faintly of cinnamon from the candles her mom lit for guests, and said I wasn't doing this anymore. The engagement ended that night, but what followed was slower, more painful. I kept expecting my fiancée, Rachel, to call, to say her mom was out of line, to say she was sorry, to say something. But days turned into weeks, and all I got was silence. Not the angry kind, not even the hurt kind, just a nothingness that made me feel like I'd imagined the whole relationship. I loved her. I really did. But there's only so long you can stay in love with someone who won't fight for you. Turns out, the woman I was ready to marry couldn't bring herself to say one word against her mother. Not even when that same mother reduced our future to dust in under 30 seconds. I didn't block her, didn't delete her number. I just waited, and when nothing came, I started counting. 1 week, then 2. Then I stopped counting because it was obvious she wasn't going to reach out. Not because she was angry, but because she didn't know how to be uncomfortable. Rachel avoided conflict the way some people avoid spiders or tight spaces. She froze when things got messy. And her mother? Diane thrived in that mess. It didn't used to be like this. Or maybe it did. And I just didn't see it clearly until the ring hit my chest like a slap. We met in Flagstaff, both of us in our 30s. I worked in property inspection. Long days, long drives, roof lines and basements and cracked drywall. She taught early childhood education. She liked baking and indie films and using too many pillows on the bed. I liked how she made everything feel a little softer, a little lighter. For a while, I thought we balanced each other out. But that balance always tipped when her mom entered the room. Diane had a way of steering conversations like a cruise ship captain. Smooth, controlling, impossible to ignore. If she didn't like something, she'd tilt the room until everyone else agreed with her. And Rachel? She'd smile and agree, even when I was the one getting tilted. The first time I saw Diane glare at me was over meatloaf. I said I like mine with ketchup. She called it low class and asked Rachel if she really planned to marry someone with gas station taste. Rachel laughed, not the mean kind, the nervous, keep the peace kind. That's when I should have known. People don't talk about this part. The middle, the in-between, the days after everything falls apart, but before anything makes sense again. That's where I lived for a while. I didn't eat much. Coffee and crackers, mostly. The kind of meals you make when you're pretending to be fine, but don't have the energy to lie to yourself. Matt, the friend who let me crash at his place in Sedona, checked in once or twice. Said I could stay as long as I needed. Didn't press. Good man. Knew enough to give me space, but not so much that I disappeared completely. The hardest part wasn't the breakup. It was the echo. You walk out of something like that and think the pain will be loud, rage, grief shouting into the void. But instead it's quiet. Pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just sits with you like a fog. You open the fridge and see the almond milk she liked and realize you're still buying out of habit. You go to text someone something funny and your thumb hovers over her name before you remember. That's the kind of pain nobody warns you about, the kind that shows up in ordinary places. She didn't reach out. Not once. No message. No voicemail. No, are you okay? Or even I'm sorry. And that silence? It said more than 1,000 apologies ever could. Because it meant she wasn't torn. She wasn't confused. She had made her choice, and that choice didn't include me. I went through all the phases like grief, denial, anger, bargaining. I even told myself maybe Diane had pressured her, manipulated her. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she'd call tomorrow. I'd stare at my phone like a fool, willing it to buzz. It didn't. Then came the shame. That deep, heavy shame of loving someone who wouldn't fight for you. Not even a little. And when that shame settled, I started remembering things I had ignored. Like how Rachel always asked me to change the subject if I ever brought up tension with her mom. Or how she once told me she felt torn between us, like we were on opposite ends of a rope and she was stuck in the middle. I thought it was a metaphor. Turns out, she meant it. One night, I sat on Matt's back porch with a blanket around my shoulders and a bottle of something stronger than I usually drink. Stars out, desert air cold and honest. And I thought, I almost built a life with someone who'd rather keep the peace than protect the person she claimed to love. That thought hurt worse than the ring ever did. By week 3, I'd stopped expecting a message. It became routine. Wake up, check my phone out of habit. Remember there was nothing to check. I wasn't blocked, just forgotten. And somehow, that felt worse. I got a job offer from a firm in Prescott. Same line of work, property inspections, but with better pay and fewer ties to places filled with memories. I took it, packed up my things from Matt's place, and moved into a small rental on the edge of town. Quiet spot, trees out front. One of those porches that looks like it's waiting for someone to sit and regret something. I did a lot of that. At first, I told myself the new job was a fresh start. Clean slate. But grief doesn't care about zip codes. It followed me. Showed up in the creak of unfamiliar floors, the hum of late-night silence, the way my new coworkers paused when they asked if I was seeing anyone and I had to say, not anymore. Rachel's voice still lived in my head. Not in a romantic way, just a quiet echo of things she used to say when things were good. Like when she'd hum while doing dishes or read signs out loud on road trips. I couldn't escape it, and I didn't want to admit how much of my daily life had once been shaped around someone who now couldn't even send a "hope you're okay." One day, I drove back to Flagstaff. Not for her, for closure. I stopped by a coffee shop we used to go to. Same place, same smell, but the barista was new, and the menu had changed. Everything was familiar and wrong at the same time. I didn't go by her parents' house. Didn't want to see Diane, or whatever mask Rachel was probably wearing now, to keep the peace. I just sat there, drank my coffee, and let it settle. This was real. Over. On the way back to Prescott, I took a detour through the hills. Wind in my face, windows down, that crisp Arizona air that makes you feel like you're driving through a new version of yourself. That's when it hit me. I wasn't mourning Rachel anymore. I was mourning the version of me that believed someone like Diane could be part of my future and not destroy it. Sometimes what you miss isn't the person. It's the idea of who you thought you could be with them. The funny thing about starting over is how empty it feels at first. People talk about fresh starts like they're exciting, clean slates, new chapters. But they don't tell you about the echo, about waking up in a bed that doesn't creak the same, pouring coffee into a mug with no story behind it, staring out the window and realizing no one knows you here. There's no shared history, no one to finish your sentences. Prescott was kind, though. Quiet. The kind of place where neighbors wave from across the street, but don't ask questions. I like that. My new job was solid, steady work, respectful clients, a boss who didn't micromanage. It should have been enough. But grief doesn't care about your circumstances. It creeps in during the in-between moments. The drive to work. The pause before you fall asleep. The way a song hits you at the wrong time and leaves you wrecked for hours. I ran into a woman at the grocery store. Nothing romantic, just one of those brief human connections that catches you off guard. She asked me if I was from around here. I said, sort of. That's the best I could do. I wasn't from anywhere anymore. My old life was in boxes. Some literal, some emotional. Unpacked, unsorted. One night, I found the ring again. I hadn't looked at it since the day Diane threw it. It was still in the coat pocket, wrapped in a napkin I grabbed off their dining room table. I sat on the edge of my bed, held in my hand. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. It felt like finding something that used to matter. Like a souvenir from a country that no longer exists. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I just looked at it, turned it in the light. Then I got up, walked to the kitchen, and dropped it into an old coffee tin I kept spare keys in. Sealed it shut. It was never about the ring. It was about what it represented. A promise. A plan. A future built on the idea that love could survive anything. Even a mother like Diane. But that wasn't true. Some storms don't pass. Some storms move in and set up house. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Time didn't heal anything. It just smoothed the edges. That's the part they don't tell you. You don't wake up one day and suddenly feel whole again. You just stop bleeding. You go to work. You make dinner. You answer emails. And somewhere in the middle of all that, you realize it's been a while since you cried in the shower. That's supposed to be progress. I started running again. Not far, not fast. Just a few laps around the block at dusk, when the air starts cooling and the neighborhood settles into itself. It helped. Something about the rhythm, the movement. It made the silence feel less like emptiness and more like space. Space I could fill with new things, maybe. I started talking to a woman named Lila at the hardware store. Nothing serious. Just conversations about paint colors and faulty plumbing. She had this way of laughing with her whole face, like she didn't care who was watching. I liked that. We got coffee once. Sat on a bench outside the library and talked about nothing for 2 hours. It felt human. No expectations. No ghosts in the room. And then one evening, Rachel texted. Just like that. Her name lit up my screen while I was making dinner. grilled cheese, and tomato soup. I froze. Not because I didn't want to hear from her, but because I didn't know what version of her I'd be speaking to. The woman I loved? Or the one who stood in silence while her mother humiliated me? The message was short. I've been thinking about you. Hope you're okay. That was it. For a long time, I just stared at it. There were 1,000 things I wanted to say. About pain, about abandonment, about the silence that crushed me more than her mother ever could. But instead, I just typed, I'm fine. Hope you are too. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and kept cooking because I was done bleeding. After her message, I thought I might feel something, anger, sadness, maybe even that old spark. But it was like watching a movie you'd already seen too many times. You know all the lines, all the twists, and none of it surprises you anymore. I didn't reply again, and she didn't follow up. That told me everything. I kept living. That's what it felt like, not thriving, not healing in some cinematic sense, just living. Paying bills, fixing a leaky faucet, laughing at bad TV. Slowly, my life started becoming mine again. Not the version I built with someone else in mind, but one shaped by simple routines and quieter expectations. One afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened. It was Diane. Her voice was as smooth and sharp as ever. She said she regretted how things ended and hoped we could clear the air. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, heart rate steady. For the first time, her voice didn't rattle me. I didn't call her back. There's a point where you realize some people don't want resolution. They want access. And when you stop giving it to them, they act like you're the one being unreasonable. Diane didn't want to apologize. She wanted to pull strings again, make herself central. I wasn't interested. Rachel never reached out again. Not on my birthday. Not on the date that would have been our wedding. Nothing. And still, I didn't block her. Not out of hope, out of proof. Proof that when someone shows you who they are, they mean it. And that silence? That was her truth. No more wondering. No more excuses. Just peace. That winter, Prescott got its first snowfall in years. I sat on my porch that morning, coffee in hand, watching it settle over the trees like forgiveness. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just soft and steady. And I realized something. Healing isn't the absence of pain. It's the presence of perspective. And I was finally starting to see things clearly. There's a strange kind of freedom in being left behind. It's not the freedom you want, not the kind you dream about when you think of second chances or fresh starts. But it's real. You stop waiting for doors to reopen. You stop reading into silence. You just exist. And for the first time, that feels like enough. I started volunteering on weekends. Nothing major, just helping out at a shelter downtown, repairing leaky pipes, patching drywall, the kind of work no one notices unless it's done wrong. I like that. Quiet usefulness. No spotlight, no performance. Just hands and tools, and people who said thank you like they meant it. There was a kid there, maybe 15, named Leo. Skinny, nervous, always wore the same gray hoodie. He never talked much, but he watched everything. One Saturday, he followed me around while I fixed a busted radiator. Didn't ask questions, just watched. At the end, I offered him the wrench and asked if he wanted to help tighten the last bolt. He nodded, eyes wide, and did it perfectly. The next week, he was waiting by the door before I even pulled in. That's when I realized something. You don't always get to choose who you help or how you matter to someone. Sometimes the smallest acts stick with people longer than grand gestures ever could. I wasn't saving lives. I wasn't healing the wound Rachel left. But I was building something. Even if it was just a little trust between me and a kid who barely spoke. And slowly, piece by piece, I started showing up for my own life again. I cooked real meals. I invited Matt and his wife over for dinner. I fixed the screen door I'd been ignoring for months. My place didn't feel temporary anymore. It felt earned, lived in. One night, I opened my laptop to look for an old invoice and stumbled across a folder labeled wedding plans. I almost deleted it, but instead I opened it. There were lists, budgets, ideas for venues. Photos of table settings Rachel liked. A scanned copy of my vows, half-written raw. I read them, and I didn't feel pain. I felt distance, like reading someone else's journal. That version of me, the man planning a life with someone who didn't fight for him. He was gone. Not bitter, not broken, just different. That night, I renamed the folder, Lessons, and I meant it. There was a time I thought healing would come with fireworks, some defining moment where I'd know I was whole again. But it didn't happen like that. Healing came quietly, in the details I used to overlook, like the way I started humming while folding laundry, or how I smiled at strangers without meaning to. It was subtle, slow, but it was there. Lila and I saw each other more often. Still casual, still careful. She never asked about my past, and I never offered. That unspoken agreement to let the present breathe felt like the safest kind of intimacy. We met for walks, shared meals, sometimes just sat in silence. And that silence was different. Not heavy, not avoiding anything, just easy. One afternoon, we found ourselves at a thrift store on the edge of town. She was looking for an old lamp. I was just tagging along. While she rummaged through dusty shelves, I wandered into the back, past rows of forgotten furniture and yellowed books. That's where I saw it, a wedding dress, hanging alone, like a memory that hadn't been claimed. It caught me off guard, not because it reminded me of Rachel, but because I didn't feel anything. No estín, no regret, just a quiet recognition. That chapter was closed. When Lila found me, she held up a ridiculous ceramic cat and asked if it was ugly or brilliant. I laughed, said both. She bought it. We got coffee, talked about nothing important, and I realized I wasn't waiting for the past to explain itself anymore. You don't always get closure. Sometimes you get clarity instead. I went home that night and opened the lessons folder again. Not out of sadness, out of curiosity. I clicked through the photos, the venues, the scanned vows. Then I made a new document. Blank page. Just a title, What I Know Now. And I started writing. Not about Rachel. Not even about Diane. But about me. Who I had been. Who I was becoming. What it means to love someone who doesn't choose you back. And how that doesn't make your love a mistake. Just a lesson. That night, I didn't dream about the past. I slept straight through until morning. There's this moment, after a storm, when everything is still. Not just quiet still, like the world is holding its breath. That's where I was. Not chasing happiness. Not waiting for the other shoe to drop. Just living in that stillness. Letting it hold me for once, instead of trying to outrun it. I found myself reaching out more. Not to Rachel, but to the life I'd left behind while I was with her. I called my sister in Portland, sent a birthday card to my old college roommate, even fixed the busted lawn chair my dad gave me years ago and never used. None of it changed the past, but it made the present feel less hollow. At the shelter, Leo started talking more. He asked about tools, about work, about the places I'd seen. He said he wanted to do something real when he got older. I told him fixing things is plenty real. He smiled like he believed me. I hope he did. Lila and I stayed light. She never pushed. I never asked for more than she was offering. We existed in that rare space between healing and becoming. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was more honest than anything I called love before. One Sunday, I was driving back from the farmer's market with tomatoes in the passenger seat and the windows down. The air smelled like earth and heat. A song came on, one that used to mean something to Rachel and me. I didn't skip it. I let it play, and I didn't fall apart. That, I think, was the real sign. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I wasn't waiting for closure or apologies or even recognition. I had stepped out of that story. Fully. Not limping. Not dragging the weight behind me. Just walking. On my own. Sometimes people talk about love like it's supposed to save you. But the older I get, the more I think love isn't about salvation. It's about choosing someone and being chosen, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Rachel couldn't do that. Maybe she didn't know how. Maybe she never wanted to. That's not mine to fix. My job was to learn, to let go, and to keep building. And I was building. Something new. Something quiet. Something real.